Howdy, folks. This video is going to be discussing the idea of Romanticism. And no, by Romanticism, I do not mean those, romance novels that you see on the Albertsons check stand with like the dude who's half shirtless and flexing and he's really big and he looks a lot like me. Romanticism has nothing to do with like romance or love stories. Romanticism is a period of art, really, in American history. And so all of the texts that we're going to be reading are going to be romantic texts. But let's explore what that means. The first thing that we need to kind of consider when we're learning about an era of art and literature is that it's connected to everything else that has come before it, right? Any era of art or progress is sort of a reaction to what's happened previously. And so while the Romantic era generally started between 1830 and went to about 1870, those are just kind of loose dates to give us a context of when these people were writing. So if I'm putting that in the frame in my mind's schema of what else was going on in the world, this is after the American Revolution, and this is before the Civil War. And what it was a reaction to an era called the Enlightenment. And this was kind of a worldly phenomenon. This wasn't just an American phenomenon. This was something that was happening all over the globe. And it was a really important time in world history because the Enlightenment was about this shift into believing scientific progress, right? We put a lot more faith into study and research and observations and like data gathering to guide our decisions and to guide our industrial and scientific progress. It gave us another kind of foothold in how we can create meaning in our world, right? It wasn't just based on religion anymore. We had this other way of viewing the world around us. It's not to say that they totally dismissed religion. Religion was still a very important cultural aspect of many societies and many people, just as it is today. But it was sort of this separate road, this parallel road that was also running that helped us create governments and policies. And we see that in the American Revolution and the French Revolution that happened during the Enlightenment. So if the Enlightenment was all about like reasoning, science, and progress, and we see this picture here that's kind of like really emphasizing how important it is to sit in an education and learn, which I do think is important, that's not all there is to the human experience. In contrast, take a look at a picture like this, which has nothing really to do with scientific analysis or data or learning. It's all about an emotional response, right? The Romantics were a group of artists who started to say, scientific progress is good, but that's not all there is to being a human. Being a human being is about being an individual. It's about having an emotional response and understanding yourself as an individual. And so if the Enlightenment was about reasoning and science and equality, Romanticism is about emotion and nature and these ideas of supernatural things, the ideas that are basically bigger than ourselves that we don't know and can't define yet with science. And while equality for all is great, that's not to say that everyone is the same, right? So Romanticism had a big focus on this idea of an individual human being, and that while we're all equal, we all are different as well. And so Romanticism can kind of be broken up into a couple of different groups. There's sort of the catch-all umbrella of this is romantic literature based on these ideas of emotion and nature, individualism. But it can be split up into two kind of subcategories as well. First category is the transcendentalists, and the second category is the gothics. So transcendentalists basically were emphasizing the idea that all true happiness, answering this question of what it means to live a good life, starts with yourself. You have to have knowledge of who you are as an individual, and you have to be self-reliant, meaning you can do things for yourself, make decisions for yourself. So they treated emotion and imagination as some of the highest concepts that you could know and understand and start to control in your life. They also celebrated nature a whole lot because they thought within the confines of society, human beings couldn't actually understand themselves because there were too many societal forces asking them to act certain ways. So basically, if you could remove yourself from society and put yourself in nature, experience the beauty of nature, experience the wonder of nature and the emotion of nature, that you would eventually find your true self outside of what you were within the cultural confines. On the other side of Romanticism, we had the Gothics, and these folks wanted to explore the other emotions of human existence. It wasn't all just about hope and joy and self-fulfillment. They recognized that there were dark emotions and irrationalities in the human mind that also needed to be explored. And I think they had a really important element in society because they were some of the first ones to really like flat out address human beings have dark thoughts. Human beings experience fear and anxiety and depression, and if we don't address them, they can easily consume us, right? And so taking that into today, that's still very important, right? Where if we aren't going to talk about mental health is going to continue to be an issue. If we're not going to talk about depression and fear and anxiety and explore how that affects us, we're not going to get better. So to put these two kind of in contrast to each other, even though they're two different petals of the same flower, transcendentalists focused on celebrating the beauty of nature and basically the individuality one could achieve when you were alone in nature. They looked at an individual and they saw power and hope and fulfillment so long as you could understand who you were yourself, not based on anybody else, but on yourself. Gothics, on the other hand, saw people as individual, but they looked at that sort of the inner darkness of people and wanted them to explore those things that maybe people didn't want to explore, like fear and despair and evil and why these things exist in the world. So to recap, we're going to be reading some romantic literature in order to see what these romantic authors have to say about here's what you need in order to live a good life, or here's what will prevent you from living a good life.